Aye. Any opposed? No. We are out of closed meeting. We need to now certify. Lynchburg City School Board certifies that in the closed meeting just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting and lawfully permitted to be so discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion. Need to certify. Roll call vote. Go with Dr. Brennan.
I agree.
Ms. Morrison.
Yes.
Ms. Carter.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
Dr. Polly.
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Shanna? Yes. Okay. All please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that brings us to public comments. We do have comments this evening. Before I call individuals up, I need to read our, I guess a disclaimer is not the right word, but our policy here. Persons appearing before the school board will not be allowed to campaign for public office or promote private business ventures and should not use profanity or vulgar language or gestures, make comments about a public official or an employee that are not related to his or her official duties, engage in behavior that disrupts the meeting or intimidates others, or address the school board on issues that do not concern the services, policies, role, and or responsibilities of the school board. Individual speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes. The speaker representing a group shall limit his comments to 5 minutes. The representative shall identify the group at the beginning of his or her presentation. A group may have no more than one spokesperson. The total allotted time for public comments at school board meetings is 30 minutes. Public comments are reserved for the public to provide input. The board does not respond to comments, answer questions, or otherwise engage in discussion at this time. Mr. Gonzalez, if you could come up to the podium and address the board.
May I begin?
Hi.
Hi, my name is Vicente Gonzalez. I'm an alumni of EC Glass High School and of Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm here today to speak to y'all about a memo that I came a few months ago to address. Memo 05917 was released on March 1st. And this memo addresses already outlined procedures regarding immigrant youth in our city schools. Key points I want to address in this memo, which was released by Governor McAuliffe, is that the memo clearly outlines that schools are required to provide general information to families of their legal rights. Schools are to refer families to legal assistance in any case which may involve a student or their family in terms of detention or possible deportations proceedings. Schools must take necessary planning in advance of what to do in cases of should a child's guardian be detained by ICE or should a guardian be facing deportation proceedings. And most importantly, administrators are encouraged to develop working relationships with an immigration attorney. I myself was undocumented here in Lynchburg up until I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore at EC Glass. There are many undocumented youth in our city schools, that face uncertainty and a school board and a school system which is not acknowledging their needs. I bring this up to you because I'm afraid that none of this has been addressed. And I'm afraid with the repeal of deferred action for childhood arrivals that undocumented youth and undocumented families are at higher risks, and that this school board has done little to nothing to quell those fears. I guess I'm just asking the reason why there has been such little action on this issue. especially in this time of great fear. Our families are facing separation, our students are facing deportation, and the silence from this board has been extremely loud. So with that, I will leave you and ask you to take the necessary measures to provide safety to our undocumented youth, to our parents, and to our families, that we have the right to attend our schools, that we have the right to feel safe and feel like we belong in this system. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Durham.
Hi, everyone. First, I wanted to share my story with you guys. I was a student at Heritage High School. I was undocumented until DACA came about. But through Heritage, through the Lynchburg City School, through you guys, I was given the opportunity to do early college. Not only did you guys give me all the resources to prosper, the Lynchburg City Schools also paid for all my books, you know? And when first DACA was established, we had to pay out-of-state tuition. But I mean, even with the books, that was like a huge help. But now, I mean, you gave us all the resources to prosper, but now we need the resources to keep our children safe. A lot of students are undocumented and don't even have DACA yet, but now that DACA is being revoked, they need to be safe. A lot of principals, they do not know that they have to implement and give resources to these students, immigration lawyers, what to do when ICE shows up at school, what to do if their parents are taken away. I believe that we need to be prepared and not sit around and just wait for it to happen. We need to be ready for it to happen. And I just want to say I'm so grateful for Lynchburg City School Board because I'm a product of Lynchburg City Schools. And I went to Lynchburg College, now I'm a student at Liberty. And I can't wait to see what I do. But now I just have limited time. I only have DACA for 2 years now. But everything happens for a reason. Everything's in God's hands. I got DACA right when I had to do early college. My freshman and sophomore years, I did it in high school. I graduated from CVCC before I graduated from Heritage. And that was an opportunity I wouldn't have been able to receive in my country. And that's something we need to understand, that we are so grateful, but now we need to be kept safe by you guys. And that's all we're here to ask today. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that brings us to agenda item C1, Standards of Learning State Accreditation Results. Dr. Massey?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking Dr. April Bruce to come and present that matter to us at this time. April?
Good evening. Seems like I just did this not too long ago. We are tonight going to be talking about accountability in Virginia Public Schools. For us, our accreditation information and results. So we will be going through that information tonight. Just as a kind of timeline of what has occurred over the last month or so, on August 15th, the state released the federal results, and I presented that to you actually that night. On September 13th, last week, state calculations of SOL results were released, and accreditation ratings also released. Tonight, of course, September 19th, we are going to be presenting those to you. And just as an upcoming event that will happen, on the 26th of September, the on-time graduation rates will be released. And shortly after that, we will go over the 3 graduation rates or measures that are given to schools. So we'll go over those when those are released. Just as some background information so we can kind of make things really clear as we go through, of course, we use the Standards of Learning tests for federal and state calculations. The pass rates between the two systems are different, so you will see numbers tonight that look different than the numbers that you saw back on August 15th. Students begin taking the tests, of course, in third grade, and for high school students, they have to take these tests along with their coursework in order to earn verified credits to earn their diplomas. We went over this last time just to let you know there are some differences in the way things are calculated. Oftentimes we see that state accreditation scores, state calculated scores, are a little higher. And the reason are some of these things that are up on the screen. The biggest ones for us are the state looks at students who have been in the country less than 11 semesters, or in a Virginia school less than 11 semesters, who are receiving ESL services. Those students, if they happen to not pass a test, their scores are excluded. That occurs for the state calculations, not the federal calculations. A couple of other ones that impact our scores in Lynchburg greatly, there are some substitute tests that the state recognizes. We utilize the Work Keys assessment for writing and the Work Keys assessment for reading for our high school students in place of, if they pass that test, they can count that as a substitute test in place of their SOL score for reading or writing. So we do have quite a few of those. The state recognizes those as straight out passes. The federal calculations don't look at those at all. And then the real big one for us are the remediation recovery points. Those are earned in reading and math, and those are for students who failed the previous year, but we remediate them, and then when they test the next time, if they pass, then we get to count an additional pass in the numerator and denominator as we're calculating. So that does bump the scores up quite a bit for state accreditation. The state accreditation targets are on the screen. For English, it's 75%. Math, history, and science are at 70. And high schools have another target to meet, and that's the graduation and completion index, and that is at 85. Soon to be going up, I believe, to 87 or 88 with the new accreditation measures that we'll have. Just as a reminder, for state calculations, the English score for middle school and high schools, that also includes writing. They have an 8th grade writing and a 10th grade writing test, and they calculate those in along with the reading. Schools must meet that 70% or 75% pass rate. High schools also have to have the 85 as the graduation and completion index. They do allow a 3-year trailing average to meet that 70 or 75%, and you'll see in a little bit that actually worked in a couple of schools, and we were able to meet accreditation based on a 3-year average. Recovery points in reading and math are available, and those substitute tests are also available for the state calculations. And again, the graduation indicator, high schools must meet that graduation objective as well as meeting all the targets for their academic areas. 85 points is the benchmark. The GCI, Graduation and Completion Index, that is not a pass rate or a graduation rate. Those will come out later. It is basically just an index score. What they do is any student who gets a diploma of any type is assigned 100 points. Anybody who gets a GED is assigned 75. If they're still enrolled, it's 70. And a certificate of completion, meaning they've completed all of their coursework but not necessarily met all of their SOL passes, they get 25 points. And then they're averaged together and you get that particular score. Good news for us this year is that EC Glass went up 2 points. They're at 87. And Heritage High School is at 89, and they're up 3 points. And these are based on the 2017 graduates that we just had. The state kind of expanded the designations for accreditation, so just to go over them real briefly, fully accredited, of course, means you meet every single benchmark. Partially accredited approaching means that you're right there within a narrow margin of about 2 points from the target. And partially accredited improving means that you're making acceptable improvement and approaching that benchmark. Partially accredited warned means that they're not within a narrow margin and they're not making acceptable progress toward the targets. Partially accredited reconstituted, that's for schools that have failed to meet the requirements for 4 consecutive years. The State Board of Education has to give permission to reconstitute. And then accreditation denied. Accreditation denied means that it fails to meet the requirements for 4 consecutive years. And then one that we have some schools designated as to be determined at this time. That just means the state is reviewing the progress of the school. We've had to apply to be determined school at this point, and we will learn more about that in the next few weeks. So to our scores. We've broken them down elementary, middle, and high school. Just to kind of explain what all these numbers jumbled up there are, I have got the score, the pass rate for each school in each of the 4 areas. And in parentheses, you will see the gain or the loss in points from last year. So that kind of just shows you exactly where we were and where we are now. It also lists the status that's been assigned to the school at this time. Those listed as to be determined, those will be updated as soon as the state makes their decisions on what designation they will be given. The ones in red, of course, are places where they've missed the target. You will see that Bedford Hills in English, there's a little asterisk up there that shows a 77. That's their 3-year trailing average. Remember, they had to meet that 75 to be accredited in English. They scored a 72 this year, but with that 3-year average, they're at 77, so they did meet full accreditation. Middle school, our scores there are listed. We had another issue there with the 3-year trailing average for Sandusky Middle School, and they met full accreditation in math based on that 3-year trailing average. And again, for middle school, the English does include writing as well for the 8th graders. And these are our high school scores, along with our graduation and completion index, and it shows the designations there. We thought it would be important to show that we are focusing on exactly where our deficits are at this point. As you can see, our students are doing well in history. They are not doing as well in English, and we are really working on that. We've got half of our schools accredited in English, meeting that 75 benchmark. Of course, the benchmark is higher in English. 81% of our schools in math, 75% in science. This is just a listing. Basically, it was included as a reference point so that you can see the status that was issued last year compared to this year. The percentage of fully accredited schools, we have moved up in the last couple of years. We were at 19%, then we went up to 31%, and then to 44%. And let's see, Mr. Childress, we're missing some slides. Okay. We got a couple more slides for you. Looking at that same slide with the state information, we also looked at the percentage of fully accredited schools across the state, and looking at the 15-16 school year, you can see that the state was at 78%, they went to 81, and then they went to 86, so they're showing growth. across the schools. And of course, that's out of 1,800 schools, or a little over 1,800 schools. But we just wanted to show you what that state percentage of fully accredited schools looked like. And then we had a request to kind of look at how we compare to others around us. I guess it was several months ago, we looked at schools that we considered 1515 schools. Those are school divisions who had at least 15,000 folks in the city as a population, and also had at least a 15% poverty rate in their city. Of course, in Lynchburg, we're almost double that poverty rate, but this is at least 15%. So we had 17 different school divisions that we kind of look at to see how we're doing as far as achievement, and those scores are listed for you there. It's the percentage of fully accredited schools from those 17 school divisions. It also lists at the bottom the name of the school division, and then how many schools are fully accredited out of the total number of schools there. And that is my last slide, and I will take any questions related to the data that you all have.
Board member questions or comments? Dr. Coleman?
Thank you, Dr. Bruce, and all. You are doing a fine job of presenting us what is to present. At some point, Mr. Superintendent, I'm wondering, how do we get down into the weeds that can be difficult, at least for me as a board member? The professionals can deal with it better. Because if accreditation ratings reflect the overall achievement within a school, not the performance necessarily of individual students. So it doesn't mean if your school is not accredited or in a position that the children aren't getting a good education. But what happens if you have 4 people, one of them like me, out of 100, I'm just saying hypothetical, I get a 10, and then the other one get a 10, and then the other one get, I don't know how they do it, they get 300s on their scores. And then you look at it, and you say, well, 2 of the students, poor things, they African American and poor. All I'm trying to figure out is, looking at all these numbers, I keep getting all these numbers. Eventually, we got to get down into the weeds and disaggregate the stuff and figure out what to do. Because as the person said earlier, we got a great school division, but we got to, that's all I'm saying on this, because it's numbers, and more numbers, and the numbers never seem to be anything more than they are.
Ms. Morrison?
Well, my question is, we get the numbers, and what's next? What's the plan? Where are we going to go with it? How do we know what we're doing, what is working and what's not? And we really need to figure out how we move our schools above where they're performing. My knowledge of SOLs, it's a minimal standard. That's not our standard. It's a minimal standard. We should be achieving beyond that if we're doing what we need to do. And I guess that's the question is, how do we know what we're going to do next? What's the plan? Last year we invested, I think, $520,000 into the Empowerment Academy. We were hoping for results from that, and I think that's part of what we should look at in our plan. How's that impacting the graduation rate? That was a big part of what we looked at last year to help our students. I know that we got that idea from Roanoke, and they certainly seem to be performing well, and I think we are just as capable.
Ms. Carter?
Well, just before I lose Susan's point, why aren't the other schools represented on this? Do they not? They do SOLs also, correct?
Which
Fort Hill and
they
Empowerment
actually
Academy?
they are programs, not schools.
Okay.
So the students that are enrolled in a program, they are still listed as a base school person.
Okay.
So their scores go back to whatever school they're zoned to attend.
All right, that's
yes.
good. Well, the other thing is, it seems like between Heritage and Glass, it's a trade-off. 1 year, someone is fully accredited, and the next one it's partially accredited, and we really need to keep this in the forefront. it should be something that is talked about and addressed at each school board meeting, so we can really see what are we doing to really tackle this problem and to really try to get all our schools fully accredited or moving in that direction. And what do we need to do to get that done? Look at the ones that are doing well and the ones that have been doing well consistently, regardless of who the students are, and find out what it is. And sometimes it's not a huge solution. It could be something simple. But we need to find out what's working and let it work for the rest of these schools, or try to replicate that.
I guess I have a slight disagreement with Ms. Morrison on the SOLs. They are not simple. They are challenging. I mean, they when they first came out, they were minimal, but they're not minimal now. And a lot of them, especially when you get to the upper secondary school, can be very legalistic. There's a trick to it that the kids got to figure out. So I know when I've done the sample tests, I feel like I'm taking an ACT or SAT exam. So it's important that the public recognize that the SOLs are challenging. It's not just some simple little hurdle for everybody to jump over. That's my opinion. So I don't know. Dr. Massey, do you want to?
We certainly acknowledge that our performance is not what it should be, and it's not what you should expect and what the citizens of Lynchburg should expect. When 86% of the schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia are passing the SOL test, we need to do better than 44%. We've tackled this problem. We're working with our principals to replicate those ideas that are working at the schools that are fully accredited, those schools that have made remarkable turnaround. We're looking at what they did. We're looking at such things as simple things as you commented, time on task. How much time are we really spending on our preparation and the learning process? But we're working very hard. We want you to know that, and our principals are very much aware of what's happening. And my intention is to go from school to school with a team approach and work with each school that's denied accreditation and put those practices in place, those best practices that we found at the successful schools, put them in place at the unsuccessful schools. But we feel confident we'll make progress. We have to. There's no choice. We have to. I don't know, Dr. McLean may want to comment on some other things we're doing, but basically that's our approach.
I mean, there's some things that have continued to revise and build, the way that the curriculum is, the resources are for teachers, the process we use for looking at data. If you think of when, for example, Ms. Nelson, when she had spoken at the last school board meeting, she kind of had a system in place where you're looking at data and you're continuing to grow. I think it's supporting our principals to, each one may not have the exact same system, but to get that system in place where you get that momentum and keep going. And so we provide resources to support that, while also the principals having the autonomy to figure out what that looks like exactly in their schools. So we're providing those supports and continue to work with them, and school by school, as Dr. Massey said.
Ms. Carter?
But I want to just be clear. I know that the principals, a lot of them are working really diligently to get everything turned around, because I interact with some of them, and they really are concerned and trying to do the best they can. And also the teachers are revamping their lessons, trying to really get, if the student doesn't get it, I hear them saying they're trying to just find creative ways to change it, to make sure that everyone gets it. So not to say that they're not working. But they are.
Mr. Polly?
I wanted to acknowledge that we definitely know from school visits and interactions with teachers and principals that the teachers and principals are committed, and they're definitely working hard. But with that said, as we're looking at this information that's presented to us that we've been hearing over and over, my concern is not that a school can turn it around, because we know the schools can turn it around, because we've shown in the past schools can turn it around. We've shown that they've been able to make remarkable changes, but then a couple years later, that school is right back to where they were, just from my perspective. When I look at some schools who are doing stellar, I look at it, I don't want to call any out, but you look at some schools a few years ago who were the examples of the district, and they were doing well, test scores well, and you look at them now, and it's a complete 180. So I'm not concerned that a school can't turn around. My concern is the consistency. Can we maintain it? Because it seems like what Ms. Carter was saying, that every other year or every 2 years we go from attention on these schools, then they do well, now it's these schools that aren't doing well. So we've proven that we can turn it around. We've proven that the schools have the capacity to do what they need to do, but why we maintaining that consistency is my concern. And I know it's not an easy fix, but I just think it's important to voice it, because at different times we have different schools doing well and doing bad, and then it flips, and then we take the attention off of here and go to there. So I don't want us to keep repeating that cycle. It just kind of seems that's the way it goes. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement that schools are doing well. They are turning it around, but for some reason, after a certain time span, I don't know if it's a few years or whatever, things go right back to where they were, and then we have to start the cycle over again.
Dr. Seno?
Also, in answer to your concern, I've already talked with Dr. Massey at length about some research possibilities, ways we can use data to more formalize it, because you raise a really good point too. We could just be on an up year and think everything we did worked when maybe it added no value at all. I think it did, but we have to test that. And the data are there, either in our central data stores, which are grades information and characteristics of the class, and somehow to tie in the other more school classroom specific kinds of things that can add to that, to see what are all these factors, academic and non-academic, that could be impacting that. Another question would be, why is there this cyclical? Because I noticed that when I first came on the board and saw a presentation that pertained to our strategic plan, that there was some volatility in the numbers, and that just seemed a little odd to me. So, but just to vouch for the acting superintendent here, that there are lots of works going on to address that very concern.
Ms. Carter?
And I know this year with new principals, and then a lot of schools had major turnovers in teachers that have been there for a long period of time. And again, I always talk about the engagement of the students and the teacher. So now it's a new getting the students meshed with the teachers and the teachers meshed with the principal. So, hopefully the scores will not drop, but continue to move forward.
Ms. Snyder?
Thank you. I was just going to say, it's so frustrating to sit and watch year after year. We're just creeping up so slowly, and I think it's in attest to saying that as soon as one comes up, one drops. There's no reason, if we have all these schools that can turn around and bring it together, that we can't be edging our score up higher. I mean, there were only 3 other school districts in this chart that scored lower than us, but we've been working so hard ever since I've been here, and I'm sure before that, we've been working so hard. So we need to figure out, I feel it's really what Ms. Carter's talking about too. We have this turnover, and you're losing people, and then you're losing your momentum along the way. So what can we do to keep that momentum in the schools and the schools that have been doing this? So that's what I feel like going to be a really important piece to look at this year when you're looking at all of these things tied together.
Dr. Coleman?
Well said. To school board member Polly's thoughts, Dr. Bruce, I don't know, because again, you do a tremendous job. I'm just impressed with your work. But adding something else to do, I don't want to speculate on schools and that did well and then they go backwards, because I don't know that for sure. Is there any way we could have someone to look into what is happening? You used the word volatility of each school and over a period of time, how things have been going for them, and that would give us more of a solid type of thing. Some schools may traditionally or regularly underperform. I do not know, because I have not looked into that as carefully as I would like to, but that is something that I think would be very helpful. Alongside of that, we know Bass, which I think the superintendent has plans for. When Laverne Marsh, I saw him last night, was there, they were doing at a certain level. and now, of course, we have challenges. So that's understandable with all of that. But poverty is not a disease. And other school divisions with high levels of poverty, more than we, are consistently getting base schools to perform consistently. And so, what's up with us in that area?
Dr. Brennan.
Just briefly to add a bit to the conversation, which is that I think the other aspect of this, we're talking about the SOLs, we all know it's really the achievement gap, which is kind of driving this. And I know Dr. Massey has talked to the fact that we can look at it as achievement gap or an opportunity gap. But I really wonder, I would ask the administration if the board would support this, what Ms. Carter was saying, that this is such an important issue, you know, the achievement gap, the opportunity gap. Could we have some type of report to the board every month or every other month, and administration decide what those reports are, but not having to wait until we see the SOL results and then have the same conversation again, but actually just keep us up to date on what are some of the items that are being done as a regular item on the agenda. Maybe not every month, maybe other month, but somewhere, so we have that as an important issue for us to address regularly.
Sorry, Ms. Mason.
Thank you, Dr. And I think you articulated what a lot of us are thinking. I mean, the data is helpful and very necessary, but it seems the step that we're missing is, what do we do with the data? What's next? Or how do we move forward and utilize the data to actually implement something that's going to move the needle? Because we can sit around the table and look at the data all day long, but unless we do something with it, we aren't going to make progress. Ms. Morrison mentioned that the SOL is just as a baseline. Now, certainly they aren't easy, but that is the minimum that we're trying to get our students to. We don't want our students to be at the minimal, but we can't strive further until we reach that baseline. So thank you for sharing that.
Ms. Carter.
I know there are tests that we take to just get a gauge on how things will be. How often do we do those?
So we administer what we call the benchmark assessments. They're typically in November, and March is the time frame we tend to use. The state doesn't really release a way for us to have something that's an exact match. We have to create those and use what some partner districts also develop. And so we look at that data when it comes back. Schools look at other schools, often make visits to ones that performed well on that, but that is our first status check is in November. So we'll be looking at that. And if I may respond to a couple of questions. So to the update part, I wanted to make you aware, if you recall last year, we gave some updates on T.C. Miller and on Lincoln Middle School during the year. Part of our agreement with the state when there's a school that's denied accreditation is we provide monthly updates. So once we have sort of the final piece of all the schools that are denied and are meeting with the state on that, that actually creates the springboard for us to be able to provide updates, and we'll figure out the right format to do that of what's being done in the schools that are denied. The other piece, just for clarity, if I may, is just sort of some piece to the facts is I think there's not a person in the room that doesn't want us to be accelerating faster than we are students that are achieving from where they are. To the part of kind of one step forward, one step back, it is the case that we were 3 schools accredited 2 years ago. We're 7 fully accredited now. If we were just one goes in, one goes out, we'd be 3 and 3. We have made progress the last 4 years in reading and math. Every year it's gone up. So we haven't as a whole stepped back. And if you looked at the News in Advance, the data for the regional data, we were the only division this last year that didn't have a decline in one of the subjects. So we all want to increase and go forward. I also would just put out there for the board that the data shows that the progress continues to be in the right direction. It's just not as fast as we would like it to be.
Ms. Morrison,
One of the things that I took away from the presentations from Paramount and T.C. Miller at our last board meeting was the consistent language that the teachers used, and particularly in areas like math, where teachers they knew what the teacher in the lower grade how they were teaching it so that they were able to carry that up so that the students were learning it the same way. And I want to make sure that that is something that we are looking at for all schools, that if you're teaching fractions and teachers are using their own styles or what they're comfortable with, students may get confused with it. They may be taught, for example, fractions 4 different ways before they get to middle school, and which way is the right way. So I think that consistency, that we need to make sure that we're doing that.
I'd also like to comment too that the SOL scores, cut scores, and test rigor changed.
Yeah.
What, 5 years ago? 4 years ago?
By test, but yeah.
That's affecting everything also. So the level, the expectations are changing too. So, Dr. Coleman?
Mr. Chair, thank you for letting us have this meaningful conversation. I think Dr. Massey challenged us a few board members ago that we as a board should have high expectations. And I want to just go on record that Dr. Massey is really coming in and kind of changing the culture of how things have been so that we can tackle this. And in getting around to all of the elementary schools, I can see the teachers working hard and the building principals trying and all of that. So I certainly see it. And more supports are going to be needed. I see staff people working hard. Some of our directors sitting out there listening to us. At the same time, Dr. McLean, you're very right about the benchmarks and the schools that come up and make presentations. And we enjoy the presentations and they are meaningful. But at the end of the day, what's the correlation to student performance improvement? Proven. And I continue to say, and I'm finished, a kid only has 1 year to be in the first grade, the second grade, and the third grade. And while we're taking 100 years to get where we want to be, those kids are missing out on opportunities, which means we got to get down, deal with families, have that extra engagement, pilot programs. It's a lot of rolling up the sleeves, I think, that has to go alongside of helping that classroom teacher to understand culture, etc. And those are the kind of things I want to hear about, and I think our community wants to be involved in.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Dr. Brown?
So I don't understand the protocol, so Dr. Nels, maybe you can help me, but if Mrs. Carter is making a suggestion that this item be added to the agenda in the future, is that something that can be discussed and voted upon by the board at this point, or is that what happens to that request?
From my viewpoint, you've said it and it's going to happen. So, but if you want to vote for it, you can, but we'll have something on the agenda every month. That's the wishes of the board. Okay. Is it?
Well, I think we can, but just by consensus, say we'd like some kind of, give you some latitude as to how and what to present, but I mean.
I guess I think that's great. If the administration could come back and tell us what the things are that we should be following, and Dr. McLean, I think not just what the schools who are not equipped, but the ones who are, what they're doing. You know, I'm sure that they're being innovative also, but we can get on both sides of the story. That would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Carter?
And it doesn't have to be 100-slide PowerPoint.
True.
We all know we are busy, but whatever is really working or has been really effective, to share that.
Well, you know,
so you can get buried in data. So
that's what I started to say. I know you all looked at a lot of test scores, but for instance, to Dr. Coleman's point about the past, April's got a beautiful chart with 10-year scores of every school, so you probably need to see that, and we'll get that kind of thing to you. That you can see trends and improvements or slippage at the individual schools, so we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good job, April.
That's right.
That brings us to the consent agenda, which is the school board meeting minutes from the September 5th regular meeting, the September 5th work session, the September 5th closed meeting, the September 12th student discipline committee meeting, the VSBA Policy Services Contract, then the Lynchburg Juvenile Detention Center Education Program budget for 2017-18, along with the personnel report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Consent agenda passes. Thank you. Excuse me. That brings us to student representative comments. Let's start with Heritage. Mr. Shaw.
So last week we had a college night at Heritage, and we hosted over 80 colleges from across the country that came to visit Heritage, and it really provided an insight about college, and personally I feel I learned a lot from that. This week is also National Gear Up Week. The Heritage, what they did today, they had a mini college fair for sophomores to promote preparedness through Project Lynchburg, through the Beacon of Hope, and these are some photos from the college fair and college night. Is that happening on there? Like oh, okay, it's fine. For culture, it kind of ties in back into student achievement and opportunity gaps. I feel like if the student isn't comfortable in the environment they are in, I feel like it would be harder for them to learn. So a student started a mentoring program called Peers for Heritage, and this is an effort to connect seniors with freshmen who has faced challenges or obstacles in their lives. And another program, there's a lot of, it's called Overcoming Adversity with Diversity, and it's really a program to break stereotypes of different cultures, different diversities. Students who are foreign and that come to Heritage, some might be treated in a negative way by other students, but we're trying to bind the Heritage community together and make all people comfortable in this environment. And last week they hosted Get Downtown, and some students volunteered at the Citizens Climate Lobby Lynchburg chapter to inform residents about climate change, and it provided students with a voice. And really this type of stuff, giving students a voice in their community, really opens opportunities for what they want to do in life or what they want to fight for in life. Fundraisers, our varsity football coach, Brad Bradley, he's raising money through the Over the Edge for Humankind for the team for equipment and gear. His goal is $340, and he has already reached $100, which is quite impressive. The National Honor Society of Heritage High School, we're partnering with a program based in Appomattox called Gleaning for the World. And Gleaning for the World, it focuses on environmental aspects for the entire world, and we're using that to raise money for the victims affected by Hurricanes Irma and Harvey. So if any of you want to donate to the cause, we would appreciate it. Our teacher, John Rourke of HHS, painted a portrait of Ralph D. Spencer in honor for his time at Heritage. Ralph D. Spencer, he was, his little history background, he was a ninth grade biology teacher at Heritage High School, and he just came back from, he was in actually the segregation era where schools were separate but equal. He had just came from Dunbar to EC Glass and to Heritage when schools progressively became integrated. And we just wanted to tribute him for his persona of equality, for quality of education for all students. The annual James River trip by the environmental classes at Heritage took place today and yesterday. It really taught students about the importance of water quality and gain experience of learning how to canoe. And these classes are taught by Mr. Alex Drumheller. And this was a video from, I don't know if it might play or not. It's just them canoeing, or picking up canoeing.
Well, for some.
That's a great example.
Yeah. Extracurricular highlights, Heritage Pioneers. I'm proud to say they broke their 32 winning streak against Appomattox and basically made history. This Friday we're taking on Glass at the City Stadium starting at 7. Other sports teams, golf, cross-country, volleyball, they're doing well as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Roberson, what's that going on at Glass? Look at that.
So last week we had a lot of fundraisers to raise money for Houston, and it was called Hilltop is for Houston. So one night we had a fundraiser, Thursday night, and then for the next day, students and teachers paid $2 to wear a hat in school. And then we also had Hilltop is for Houston t-shirts, and teachers paid $5 when they could wear jeans, and we had a fundraiser at those Mr. Goody's locations. We have an incentive for teachers, well mainly faculty, and it's called Hilltopper of the Week, and you are nominated by just people in the school if they really appreciate you. So last week's winner was Mr. Frankfurt, and he's a math teacher and swim coach, and he has been for 6 years at Glass, and he has patience with his students and is logical in his approach to help his students succeed. October intercession is approaching, so during intercession, Glass provides remediation sessions for SOLs, like for the people who have failed, and also SAT, ACT, and PSAT prep. And for sports, Friday we host Heritage at the City Stadium, so please come, sit on the Glass side, you know, can't sit on the Heritage side. And for other athletics such as volleyball, golf, and cross country, you can check the EC Glass Facebook page. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Appreciate it. Dr. Coleman.
Very quickly, I just want to say, I know both of these reps' parents. You all are incredible examples of young students. Mr. Chair, just for the public's benefit, or at some other point, Mr. Shaw raised a question in the last report. How is this board handling that, or the superintendent, relative to Mr. Shaw's question or concern from the last board meeting?
We're having a meeting tomorrow.
Very good.
About that very issue.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That brings us to item F, School Board Committee Reports. Ms. Mason.
I attended the first yearly meeting at the Governor's School, and Dr. Smith and the administration have gotten the year off to a great start. So I encourage my fellow board members and the public to come out to any activities they see listed, and I certainly will keep you apprised of anything upcoming.
Okay, thank you. Any other? These are just getting started, so. Okay. We can move now to unfinished business. This is the discussion for the topics for the school board retreat. Dr. Massey?
Yes, sir. We've listed what we received from the board regarding topics, and also we need to settle on a date.
I think we had, was it the 7th? November 7th?
I had November 1. I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't see.
Not the 7th. Not the 7th. Yeah. Yeah, I think November 1st. That was an open date.
Oh.
That was an open date. Yeah.
That's why I didn't forget.
Right.
I
right.
like November 1st. That's good.
Everybody okay with that?
That-
Double
that-
check.
that- oh, yeah.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah, that's fair.
Blackish.
Mr. Chair, we still have time to submit other thoughts, I guess. And but I wasn't.
It's pretty full. It may need to get thinned out as it is.
And I know we'll talk about that, because some of these things we talked about today will take quite a bit of time to deal with. But I was intrigued, not commenting on it beyond this, about the persons who came challenging us around the DACA issues. And these non-routine questions, as the board is becoming stronger in raising questions, these are some things that we need to be thinking about, and maybe some time needs to be allocated for how we go about handling matters like that and other non-routine questions and considerations.
Dr. Brannon?
Dr. Nicholas, how the list was impressive as far as topics. How does how does someone go through those and decide, sort of prioritize the different topics, or will everyone be spoken to that's raised? There was a lot of things, and all of them are good, but
there'll be some discussion with the board leadership and administration leadership, and see where, kind of based on recent discussions too, some of these will sort of percolate to the top. There's also been some, like we haven't talked about salary trends, but that's a priority. That was a stated priority from the budget from last year. So that'll be up at the top, and so it's just you have to kind of rank it, and we'll run it by board members and stuff too. It's not going to be a unilateral decision.
So can I just, and I'm sure you will stop me if this is inappropriate, but just as far as topics go, we talked briefly about the achievement gap, which I suspect would probably filter up to the top in this conversation. I'd like to sort of add one piece to that, which is the role of the equity task force by the board as far as what its role should be, maybe being considered as part of the achievement gap issue. I mean, as everyone knows, the equity task force is an advisory board to this board, but has, and I think is probably involved in what should happen with the achievement gap, but it has not been very effective for the past year or so since I've been on it. I think it'd be helpful for the board to review that policy for that committee and say, is this really something that the board wants to support, or is this something that probably should be handled in some other area? So I've submitted that to Wendy as one of the topics underneath the achievement gap issue, just for consideration.
So we will work to get this organized a little bit and kind of rank based on feedback we've had, and then we'll be in contact with board members and maybe take a poll, whatever, see what, maybe ask for feedback in terms of, ranking it from priority for what you would like to see, and kind of go from there.
So is this the list that was...
This is the list as it currently stands. I mean, there's time to add additional topics, but, I can, unless some of these get condensed significantly, there's not going to be, we're not going to have time to discuss all these as it is. It's a one-day retreat.
Right.
Ms. Snyder.
I will make a bold statement that might not make some people happy, but reminding maybe new board members that the school board retreat used to be 2 days if we had topics that needed covered, absolutely needed time covered. So I'll just put that out there.
Okay. Well, if the board wants to do that, then...
There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and there's a lot of stuff we need to talk about.
Yeah, this
is
is
a long time to go for another year before we have a chance to do this.
Right.
That's that. Yeah.
Or maybe twice a year.
And Katie, thank you for bringing that up. This may be off point, but again, we're continuously asking staff to do all of this great research and all of that, and we might even have to consider from time to time we have to do a little more to do our part as well. So that's interesting.
Okay. So we will consider this a work in progress and get back with you.
But it is definitely November 1st.
Yes. 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 Okay, that brings us to new business, LCS 1. This is just an information item. Mr. Beckles or Mr. Childress or Mr. McLean or
Good evening, Dr. Nillis and board members. Tonight I wanted to give you guys a presentation on LCS 1, which is our one-to-one initiative. We'll do a brief overview of where it started from and where we're at today, and briefly touch on are we successful or not. LCS 1 began back in 2013 when this board approved the one-to-one initiative. And at that time, though, our newest computer labs were 2 years old. Our newest computers in the division were 2 years old. The average age of our computer fleet was 6 years old, and the only wireless we had in the division was at 3 schools of innovation, where we had a one-to-one pilot program, and then we had some one-off access points on a cart, where you would roll a cart full of computers, and you'd plug in your access point, and that would be the extent of the wireless that we had in the division. We had Windows XP devices, and then limited student devices in classrooms across all grade levels. So we needed a plan, and we needed a plan quickly, and we needed a vision to move Lynchburg forward. And just moving over there, just out there. All right, so in the spring of 2013, we began a wireless infrastructure plan implementation. We got together with the IT staff and we developed a plan to increase our wireless infrastructure. We knew moving to a one-to-one, we had to have adequate wireless infrastructure in place to deal with the additional devices that we'd be adding. We also knew that we needed to prepare our teachers for a one-to-one environment, and that meant that they needed to have a device themselves that would be equivalent or better than the students would have. So that year we provided all of our teachers with a laptop. And then the fall of 2013 we created LCS 1 Vision Team, which laid out the foundation for the one-to-one initiative. We also updated some of the older general use computer labs, the wired labs, throughout the division. The vision. We knew we needed to remove barriers to accessing technology, and we wanted this to be fully integrated into teaching and learning. We knew that we needed to increase student access to online content. This is the digital age, and our students needed access to that, and they did not have it. We needed to empower our teachers to adjust the rigor of their teaching, their lesson plans, to be able to differentiate their instruction based on the individual needs of the students. And we needed to empower students to be able to learn anywhere, anytime, and to be active, lifelong learners. We needed to enable better data collection to drive instruction. We hear that all the time. Data needs to drive instruction. You cannot imagine how much better data collection has been with students having devices and not having to go to a computer lab to take a test for the teacher to get some data on how well the students are doing. We needed to prepare students to meet the technology challenges in the 21st century and to better prepare students for high-stakes testing and to prepare students to effectively use technology to collaborate and to communicate. So this is how LCS 1 has been implemented. So in 2014-15 school year, we provided 9th grade students with devices, and that gave us a great opportunity to see how the devices would be used in the classroom, to see how students would use the devices or misuse the devices. And so it gave us an opportunity to put some things in place before we did the complete rollout which was the following year in 2015-16, which all 9th through 12th grade students received devices. Last year and this year, we expanded LCS 1 to include 8th through 12th grade students. And so we kind of hit the pause button on LCS 1, and we're leaving it for the current time that 8th through 12th grade students are a part of LCS 1 and are taking devices home. Throughout this initiative, though, we have continued to increase mobile devices. This says K3, but it's actually been across the board, K7, really at this point. And just to give you an example, in 2013, Sheffield Elementary had, I think, 2 wired labs, which would have been the equivalent of 50 desktops. Okay, to date, Sheffield Elementary has a total of 237 devices in the building, bringing their device-to-student ratio to almost 1 device for every 2 students. So we've worked very hard to increase the available technology to the students. And so Sheffield actually has 8 carts of different devices, whether it be Chromebooks or HP Streams or laptops available for the students to use. Looking at the cost, this slide shows you, and I do not want this to be misleading to the board, okay? This slide only shows hardware cost. This does not deal anything with people, staff members, all right? As we've rolled out LCS 1, there had been staff members that have been needed to add, technicians and darts, because as we increase the amount of technology, we have to increase the amount of support staff to deal with that technology. So this deals with the cost. So you can see 2017 through 2020, we're utilizing the e-backpack grant from the state. And then, of course, there's a local matching component for that as well. The e-backpack grant, if you recall, the first year was written in such a way that the funds could only be used for a tablet device. So we originally had shelved that year's funding. However, this year the state, a miracle happened, and they changed their mind. They changed the way that was actually written to allow for any devices. So for this year's 9th grade students, that's actually the funding we were able to use to purchase those devices was the first year e-backpack funds. We did have some bumps in the road this past year. For 8th grade students, we did have slightly higher than we expected damages in middle school. And when I say slightly higher, I mean quite a bit higher. So we proposed 20% was our damage rate. And quite honestly, the middle school damage rate came back at close to 50%. And so we went back and tried to evaluate why was this so different than any of the other grade levels. And we think it has been a combination of things that have led to that. One of which was they did not get new devices. They got recycled devices that had been used 2 to 3 years prior to. And so they already had some wear and tear on the devices. So we think that was a big piece of the additional higher damage rate. And then the other piece that we came up with was that these students, being younger, really didn't understand how to care for the device. And so when they would pick it up, they would pick it up by the screen. And so they would break the screen. Or they would put it in their backpacks, and then they dropped their backpack, and guess what they just did? Crushed the screen. So we worked with the schools on helping to educate the students on better maintenance of their devices, and as the year progressed, that breakage rate quickly dropped. So we're very happy to see that. And then the other bump in the road is the demand for the devices exceeded our supply, meaning that grades 8 through 12 were fine. We fully provided every student devices, but we've continued to see an increase in request for devices in K7. And we try to help as much as we can, but obviously with limited funding, we're not able to. If the schools had the choices, everybody would have a device, but we can't fund that. So. Has LCS 1 been successful? I think that's a great question. I think it's a question the board has asked. and I'll be perfectly honest with you, you're not going to get an answer from me tonight on that. And this is an answer that a question that you're going to have to look at. I'm going to show you some of the goals that, as a committee, we defined, and then you approved as part of the LCS 1 initiative. I would say if you're looking at the success of LCS 1 as being the driver to increase our school accreditation or those type of things, what I would say to that is, we've continued to see progress, as Dr. McLean pointed out. We've continued to move the needle in the right direction. Has LCS 1 been a part of that? I would say certainly it has, along with the 20 million other things that we've kind of thrown up against the wall to try and fix things. But I just want to go over the 6 goals that we set aside for LCS 1 and talk a little bit about what we've done to reach those goals. So again, these are board-approved goals. Provide targeted instruction that utilizes the most current, dynamic, and interactive content to meet the needs of all students. And actually, before I get into this, I do want to say technology is a tool. All right? Technology is not a silver bullet. We can provide every student in this division with a device. We can provide them the most expensive device that we could provide. And that alone will not improve our students' learning in this division. Okay? Technology is a tool that amplifies instruction. If we have good instruction, that's amplified by the use of technology, because it's a tool that allows our teachers to do different things that they couldn't do without the technology. We talk about differentiation. And what does it mean to differentiate? Well, it means that I'm going to meet the needs of this individual student and provide them instruction in a way that meets their specific needs. So if they're weak in this particular area, I'm going to provide them instruction. If their learning style is a certain way, I'm going to provide them a lesson or an activity that suits their learning style to help that student be engaged in the learning process and to hopefully take in more information that I'm trying to teach. So technology only amplifies good instruction. The flip of that is that it also amplifies bad instruction. Okay, so if we have a teacher that's not teaching well, putting technology in the room is not going to help that teacher. It's not going to help those students. Okay? Now, back to this first goal. Teachers are incorporating more online and interactive programs and websites in order to make the lessons more dynamic. These include, but are not limited to, things like Kahoot. I think we did a demonstration one time for the board that demonstrated Kahoot. It's a fun activity where the teacher is able to go in and put in lesson or questions for the students, and it's kind of like a game for the students. They're able to answer A, B, C, D type question, and they get rewarded for being the fastest to answer the question, and so on. And we talk about data. The other thing that the tools like that help teachers do is a teacher will give a Kahoot at the beginning of a lesson so that they can get an understanding of where the student's knowledge already is. So that if they can gauge that the students already know a particular content, they don't necessarily need to spend as much time teaching that content. They can then spend time teaching other areas where the students were most weak in. So that's the beauty of providing targeted instruction that utilizes the most current, dynamic, and interactive content. And we have tons of examples, whether Kahoot, quizzes, Google Forms, Google Classroom. And you'll hear us talk a lot about Google Classroom and how it has been a huge positive impact in not just in our classrooms, but also at home with our parents. Teachers can create unique and learning activities with programs like Edpuzzle, which allow teachers to make an instructional video. So they could take a YouTube video that they've looked at and said, oh, I like this video. And now they're able to go in and actually customize that to their lesson. So they can go in and put in some questions. So the student can watch the first 40 seconds of a video, and then they can provide a question answer section for the students to go back and now address while it's fresh in their mind. And again, reinforcing the content and the topic. So you can see there are many different things that our teachers are doing that help to meet this particular goal. Establish a culture that fosters communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity to equip our students and staff with 21st century skills. So it's not only important for our students to be able to collaborate and use this technology, but it's also important for our teachers. For example, this presentation that I'm doing for you tonight, I shared this presentation with other members, staff members, so that they could go in and provide help and suggestions for particular passages or whatever. So our teachers need to be able to do that, and they do that in PLC. So when we talk about sharing data, teachers are able to do that collaboratively and not necessarily have to be in the same room. A good example of this is the Group National History Day project that students do. Websites, blogs, they allow students to push their ideas out into the real world, where prior to having access to this technology, students didn't have the ability to really go out and do a blog as part of a lesson. And so those type of activities make it real for the students. And so when they get that hands-on experience, that really helps the students to learn the content, because now they're being responsible for not only learning the content, but putting it back out into the public arena for other people to ingest that content. Establish a culture that fosters positive student engagement, where all students are encouraged to become lifelong learners and creators. As we mentioned earlier, activities such as Kahoot, quizzes, formatives, and pickers, which allow students to respond to teacher questions, not just one student at a time. In a one-to-one environment, teachers have a greater ability to meet individual students' needs. And then front-loading learning activities ahead of classroom work and creating choices are a proven effective strategy that engage students. So that would be an example of like a flipped classroom model, where you'll send a video home with the student to have the student kind of go through a particular lesson or idea, and then they can come back into class and help support the students in a particular lesson, knowledge, or particular area. Or do what would normally the homework portion that would normally be done at home could now be done in the classroom where the expert is at. Okay? How many times have your children come home to you when they were in school and said, "Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can you help me with this algebra question? Or can you help me with this calculus question?" Okay? Well, there are a lot of people that would struggle. A lot of parents would struggle with that. So when you flip that and you give the video, the talkative piece in the form of a video to the parents or to the students so they could watch it at home, and then have the students do the working piece in the classroom, that allows for the professional, the knowledge person, to be able to help the student in those difficult situations. That's just one model, one example. Another goal was to provide access to technology that will maximize data analysis and drive instruction. Google Forms is a great example of that. We already talked about Kahoot, which is that quiz type example. PowerSchool. PowerSchool is a great tool that we purchase on a yearly basis that allows the teachers to create those benchmark assessments. And not only the benchmark assessments, but they can create a weekly assessment or an assessment for the end of their a particular lesson in a book to gauge where the students are. And so they can tie that directly to the SOLs, and then they can get a better understanding of where the students are as it relates to the SOLs. And so they could quickly determine where the students are weak and where they need support and where they're strong, and the teacher doesn't need to essentially spend more time in those lesson areas. Improve student preparedness for high-stakes tests. PowerSchool is a great example of that, because if the tests the questions are written correctly to the rigor that the SOL tests are. PowerSchool is a great mirror of the SOL's environment because the tools in PowerSchool mirror almost as identical as they can make it to the SOL test. But again, it gives them that same format as the SOL test. And again, it's the questions are tied back to the SOLs, so it gives the teachers a great forecast into how well the students will ultimately do. We have lots of other activities. Students can actually do practice test nav or practice SOL questions that are released questions from the state. And so that looks just like the real SOL test. So students are able to go do that. IXL Math, and there are tons of others activities that we're currently doing to help prepare students for high-stakes testing. And then finally, establish a culture of increased stakeholder involvement through collaboration and communication. I mentioned earlier that Google Classroom has had a huge impact. One of the beauties, there's several things that Google Classroom actually allows to happen in our classrooms. If students have, say, a mobile phone, and they have their calendar for their student account on their phone, any homework assignments that the teacher puts in Google Classroom, guess where it goes? Automatically on the student's device. So the student doesn't have to keep an itinerary of what the homework assignments are. They can't go home and say, I lost my assignments, or I don't know what my assignments are. It's there for them in Google Classroom. Inside of Google Classroom or any of the assignments that they have. So if a teacher assigned them a worksheet or a web page to go do something, it's all there for the students to access. Another piece that Google put in this past year was parent access to Google Classroom. And so that allows me as a parent to look in to see what my student is doing. I don't get to see the other students, but I get to see what assignments my child has or hasn't completed. And then I could go and say, hey, you need to be doing this. Why haven't you done this, turn this project in? So again, trying to bring in that connection to the parents and the students. So these are the 6 goals that we defined and you approved when we approved the plan for LCS 1. And again, my personal opinion is that we are moving in the right direction. Are we there? Absolutely not. Has LCS 1 helped? I would say it has. I also have Chuck Yarborough, one of our DARTs here, who can give you firsthand experience. If you'd like to ask him some questions about LCS 1 in a classroom, he's worked directly with the teachers at EC Glass, helped them to formulate technology lessons that deal with many of these topics. But at this time, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, or Chuck, you want to come on up? And if you have questions that he needs to answer, he can do it as well.
Board member questions or comments? Ms. Morrison.
I have a couple of questions. Do we have a way of measuring or determining how much teachers are using the classroom technology? I liked what you said about it's a tool. It does not replace instruction from the teacher. But do we have a way of determining, for example, if somebody's using videos all week long, and is there a way to measure that?
No, there's not really any way for that. Are you saying yes?
So should not have nodded.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know of a way, but Chuck, go ahead. Come on.
If you look at, when talking to the administrators, when you look at the evaluations, when they're doing classroom observations, that's one of the components that they look at is technology being used, and then is the use appropriate, meaning are you just replacing paper with a computer and it doesn't really have an effect versus I was in a class of English this week and they were breaking out and doing some differentiation. Some kids don't like public speaking, so those kids were working with me to record themselves doing the same task, but we went from kids who were nervous about doing the public part to, well, I can do a video, because they do that with themselves all the time, and then we got down to the task of working. So that's something that I think we could ask administrators to report on. We don't specifically collect that data, but I know administrators doing observations could say what they're seeing.
I have a follow-up. When one of our listening tours last year at Dunbar Middle School, there was a parent who expressed concerns that her students were accessing what she considered inappropriate music and inappropriate games. And she said, we don't have this at our house, but they're now accessing it on the school computer. Are we able to monitor that or reassure parents that this is not something that's happening?
Yeah, so we do monitor and filter at home as part of LCS 1. Keep in mind that there's no filtering system that's 100%. And so would students be able to get to music? Music would be a very difficult one for us to actually monitor and filter out unless it's a vulgar site that's the type of music style that they would offer on a consistent basis. So trying to block something like that, we would have a very difficult time. But if they have particular sites that they would like for us to consider blocking, they could always email me at childressda@lcsedu.net, and we can evaluate that request and add it to our block list.
Okay, thank you.
But going back to your previous question, I'll just tell you anecdotally, we can look at our bandwidth utilization. So that's how much internet content is being used at any one time. Last year, we were averaging about 800 megs a second. So if you want to think about that in layman's terms, do you remember these old little floppy disks? It would be like stacking 800 of those at one time. And that's how much we were using per second. Okay? This year, we're averaging about 1,300 of those floppy disks per second. So the people are using the internet, specifically what they're using it for. We could tell you if we really kind of dug in to look at it. But I will tell you that we are putting things in place this year that severely limit the student's ability to be off task. For example, if a student tried to go to YouTube to watch a video while the teacher's teaching a particular lesson, we have a product called GoGuardian that the teacher's able to create a web zone basically. So while the students are in her class, the teacher says, these are the only sites you're able to go to while you're in my class. And so that eliminates them from being able to go to some of these other sites that could be distractors for them.
Ms. Carter?
Well, I just want to say congratulations. You all have done a lot in the short period of time. And a lot of that has to do with you too, Mr. Childress. And just, I remember not even being on the school board and hearing about the students getting Chromebooks and just hearing some of the discussion about, they were going to sell them or get rid of them or break them in. It's really been wonderful. And I think it's been successful.
I appreciate your comments, but I would certainly say it's not me at all.
Well, the group.
It's a great staff that we have here, from the administrative, senior administrative team to the IT staff, and they work really hard to make sure that we accomplish our goal.
Congratulations.
Dr. Sena?
I too think this is really impressive and a really good thing to do for our students, particularly those who are who would be without the schools on the wrong side of the digital divide, which is such a important barrier if you're not if you're not wired in. So it's great. I'm curious. It seems to me I'm starting to get a picture now of all the data that are being collected as we get these presentations from people like we got last week. And so, like for example, you mentioned that there's an ability for an instructor to, at the beginning of a new unit, to pre-test the class, and then that can help establish, basically where the students are, whether there's any need for remediation, to introduce whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Is that stuff just kept on the fly, or is there a repository for all that information, or where does that stuff go?
It depends on the application. For example, Kahoot it, it's anonymous for the students. So the teacher wouldn't know specifically which students were not really, didn't know the information. That just gives them a general idea of how strong the students are in a particular area, which is what they would want in a pre-test lesson type of scenario. However, things like PowerSchool and other iExcel and other programs that we have available, all of that data is stored within the application itself. So the teachers utilize that data. They work through PLCs along with the DARTs to analyze that data and then go back to provide additional instruction to the individual students that need some types of remediation.
So remind me again what a DART is.
A DART is a data analysis resource teacher.
Okay, thank you.
So a DART is a teacher's teacher. They help teachers learn to integrate technology into lessons.
And so finally, is there any thought of like coordinating all this information and putting it in some kind of central repository so that we can do the kind of analysis that we want to do to measure things that are working? I know it just must be a tremendous amount of information because you could test a kid every day, for example. So you won't want all of it, but certainly some of it.
We have toyed around with the idea of a data warehouse that would essentially collect all of that data and kind of create a profile for a student, so that when they're in first grade, we know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and we kind of follow them. That type of technology it's not really there yet. It's been talked about for a while in the K-12 arena, but I don't know if any really working.
Yeah. And I'd say some of that happens teacher by teacher, school by school. A whole systematic approach is something still to figure out. But there are teachers who keep that on their own spreadsheets in their classroom. And so at a teacher level, sometimes that works. Schools often create their own spreadsheets for some of that. At a broader level, it's a bigger beast to tackle. And things we still have to
But I will say also PowerSchool does that as well. So PowerSchool, we import our previous year's SOL data for the students, so that as if I'm a teacher and I get new students this year, I'm able to go back and look at their SOLs to see where they're weaker. So some of that is in PowerSchool.
That's great. Thank you.
Do you have a comment?
Can I add to that real quick? We tend to capture data in two sort of large groups. There's a lot that works with a lot of things we capture with the level of coaches, where we do PowerSchool benchmark testing, and that data is housed. Coaches are churning through that right now. I know English and math are both providing that kind of data. But where I really like the Chromebooks and the ability to get data is, as a teacher, I just need to know when I start class, what did they get from yesterday? And so it used to be you could give them a little quiz, but you're not going to grade that till the end of the day. Now I can give, and we have dozens of tools, a quick quiz, and I know straight for instruction right now I need to spiral these 3 things. And that's where I think we're not housing that data, but that's where I think we see spiraled instruction that is significantly different. We just couldn't do that until we had this level of technology. So that stuff doesn't get saved, but it definitely, I think, has a more immediate impact.
Dr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm probably getting into the weeds for just a quick moment. First, I want to thank you, Mr. Childers, for helping me with my iPad. That's why you are the director, and you're doing a fine job, and I appreciate that. I'm not being judgmental, but I'm wondering, in the unlikely event, now you mentioned earlier bad teaching. I don't know if that ever occurs. That's at one level with training. But what are we doing where, and I'm not being judgmental, where we may have, if there's such a thing as bad parenting or vacant parenting or parenting that is not as engaged around technology? How are we at that level helping families to appreciate the technology that their kids are bringing home, that they might be engaged in it? Are there training opportunities? And to what level are we working all of those things out so that engagement can be in place to assist the students so that the tool of the technology can correlate to performance? Then I certainly hope that we don't have any bad teaching, but that would be dealt with also in the training. How do you all address all of that?
Yeah, so first let me say I wasn't suggesting we have bad teaching. I merely was stating the fact that it amplifies both good and bad. And then to answer your question, so last year we offered several training opportunities for parents. We met in community centers and locations to, we did a couple of internet safety training sessions and stuff for parents to help engage them in the process and so that they can know what's going on with the students with their devices.
Can we do more? Do you think that we've done enough? Is there a support system that you need?
Say we've done enough. It's for us. It's part of trying to balance, our time and schedule with the staffing that we have. Really to try.
Let me push this too. I thank you for reminding us several times in your presentation that the board approved this. And I heard the 6 goals, and you gave us good stuff to go along with each of them. Did we ever see, or do we have something that kind of shows us what's going on to make each of these things happen? And as it relates to what I just said, have we really thought through, boom, 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 how in piloting we can pull people together for engagement to make sure that families are engaged, et cetera, so forth and so on at this level, because I think that's incredibly important. And I'll give one example of a fine job that you did. I remember maybe not this year, it was last school year, a parent was concerned about their child at the Empowerment Academy having a Chromebook. And I sent an email to you. You took care of it just like that. So I'm just wondering, because that, as it relates to the achievement gap, school board member Kim over there, a doctor, said that the digital divide is a huge thing. So I got this. You talked about how some of them were mishandling it. But can we do more? And have we thought about more? And has this board thought about the non-routine questions that would not cost anything to address family and parental engagement around technology?
And again, I think we certainly can do more. It's a matter of, again, finding the time and putting the pieces together to make that happen. And I think really the key is trying to get a better idea of what the needs of the community are, so that we have good involvement from the community itself.
Let me say this last thing too, Dr. Sinner, thank you for your input. But Derek, when we were in Boston, you remember a school board meeting, you came back and reported that they had maybe a bus, and the bus and it was, yeah, and the bus was there, and then it could give the internet access to neighborhoods or wherever where they didn't have it. After school hours. All of those kind of things. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and so along those lines, we did, was it last year, year before last, we added wireless internet to several of our community centers. And we do publish on our website places where students can get free wireless. And we have entertained the idea of putting wireless on our buses. We've gone as far as to actually look for grant opportunities to make that happen.
Wow. Mr. Collins?
I just wanted to put my parent hat on for a second and commend the Google Classroom because it has increased the engagement with my older, elementary school children. They would give you all the details about their day, what they got going on, things they did, even stuff they're not supposed to tell you. My child in middle school, not so much. Right. So the conversation before Google Classroom, hey, how was your day? Fine, go to the room. Boom, she's in there. Now when she comes home, I already know, hey, did you get those words turned in? How did that science test go? How was this report today? So it's more of a, I don't have to pry for information. I already know, so it kind of forces her to really like, oh, well, he's already going to check it. So I'm very much supportive, and any parent who wants to get more engaged on the day-to-day of their kid, please, it's very user-friendly. Google Classroom has given me insight to what my daughter's doing, so she doesn't have to feel like I'm always over her shoulder, but I'm still engaged. So I just wanted to give a big support for Google Classroom, because it has definitely changed the engagement on how I monitor my middle school children.
And now that you mentioned that, along with Dr. Coleman's comments, that may be a good opportunity for us to maybe do another round of visits with the community on Google Classroom to get some more parents engaged.
Right.
Because the information's there. They just need to plug in to get it.
Right.
Ms. Morris.
I just have one quick question. We last year looked at insurance that parents pay for the Chromebooks. And have we found that that insurance has been adequate to replace or repair what needs to be done?
We decreased the insurance fee from $75 for a 4-year period to a $20 payment every year.
Okay.
And we did that in hopes that it would increase the number of partakers in the program. We did not see as much of an increase as we had hoped to have seen last year as a result of that. This year, I think it's been a little bit better because people realize that that $20 is worth it. If you have a broken screen, that's roughly $60 right there alone.
Right.
To answer your question, it hasn't fully funded the repairs, but we've been able to take care of the repairs with the existing IT budget.
Okay.
Ms. Carter?
And just thinking about the equity task force or equity engagement department, maybe, working with them to try to figure out how to engage the parents around technology.
And that's what we did last year.
Okay,
we
good.
worked with Ms. Reeves in order to reach out to the community.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to superintendent's comments. Dr. Massey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask Anthony Beckles to speak to us about the expiring meal benefits at 3 of our schools. We're concerned about this, and I'm sure the board needs a report on that. Anthony, if you please, sir.
Good evening. Last board meeting, you had asked for an update before the expiry date of September the 25th of where we are as far as what are we doing and how many students we still have at this moment. You have a memo that details the information, but for the benefit of the TV audience, I'll read the note, and then if you have any questions, I can answer those after the note. It's the entirely expiring meal benefits. Under the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs, a student's eligibility status determined in the previous school year carries forward to the first 30 operating days of the new year. On Monday, September the 25th, 2017, last year's eligibility for free or reduced price meals will expire. With the addition of 4 Lynchburg City schools to the community eligibility provision, students at only 3 Lynchburg City schools are required to demonstrate eligibility for free or reduced price meals by either direct certification or the completion of a household application for free and reduced price meals. Students at each of the 3 schools, E.C. Glass High School, Heritage High School, and Bedford Hills Elementary School, received an application form as part of their registration packet distributed on August the 8th. On Wednesday, September the 6th, notices were mailed from the school nutrition office to the households of all students who were eligible for free or reduced price meals last year, but who did not have an eligibility determination for the school year 2017-18. The notice reminded households of the expiration date and provided another application form. On Monday, September the 11th, the Director of School Nutrition met with principals of 2 of the 3 schools to discuss strategies that the school could implement to communicate the need to turn in a complete application before September the 25th. Both principals launched a phone campaign targeted at students who had large meal charge balances as an indication of possible need for meal benefits. On Wednesday, September the 13th, a phone and email message alert was sent out from Cindy Bob to all households of both high schools, again reminding parents, guardians of the need to have a current application approved before September the 25th. On Monday, September 18th, parents, guardians of the 24 Bedford Hills students yet to submit a new application received a personal call from the school nutrition office to encourage completion of a current year's application. School nutrition created a flyer that was sent to both high school principals to be posted throughout the building to advance students' awareness of the impending cutoff date. The many efforts have yielded modest success, and of this afternoon, Tuesday, September 19th, the following numbers of students were eligible for meal benefits last year will be subject to paying the full student meal price after September the 25th. EC Glass High School, 96 students. Heritage High School, 106 students. And Bedford Hills Elementary School, 23 students. I mean, I think we have done all that we could do to get the message out. And as of today, that's where we stand.
Well, thank you. It's, I guess, somewhat discouraging that we have over 200 high school students.
It's about 2.8% of our
yeah.
Population.
Ms. Carter?
Well, according to this, it says eligibility for free or reduced lunch by, what's the direct certification?
That's like SNAP, one of the TANF, one of those government programs.
Right,
If they're
okay.
direct certified, they come through and that's automatic.
So if we know that any of these students receive that, is there any way to expedite this for them? If
they're direct certified, they're okay.
These have not been these are not direct certifiable.
Okay, so how can they be direct certifiable? The students will have to say that, or the family member?
Now, like I said, that comes from social service and the whole nine. So whatever the parent did to get
right, okay,
that
they just have to
benefit.
certify that on the application.
Right.
Okay, all right. The other thing is, so how many what's the total number of students eligible at EC Glass and Heritage? Like how many of this 90 out of what number? Do we know?
That I don't have on the top of my head.
About 1,400 students at EC Glass, about 1,200 at Heritage.
Do they all qualify though? Or-
No. The total number of students,
60%, I think, roughly.
So,
Dr. Coleman.
Pardon my ignorance, but I can't explain my. Building principals are not able to sign for the parent in the event that there is
Building
something.
principals can.
Okay.
well, can't we just?
We had that discussion last year.
You did.
Pardon me, what was that?
Just sign for them. Why don't we just sign for them?
I just brought up that. I don't
No,
want to
no,
create a
I-
ruckus, but I just had that floating in my mind that building principals could possibly sign the forms for these individuals if there has been due diligence to get it and to care for.
For example, if a child has a parent that can't get the parent to come and fill out the form, they get a hold of either the guidance counselor or go to the principal and say, I need to fill out this form, but I can't get my parent to whatever. The principal can get the appropriate information and do the form.
But you're relying on the student to make that initiative.
Right, right.
Right. Okay.
But the principal can sign the forms.
I'm visiting the schools tomorrow. I'll see to that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Great.
I didn't
Okay.
know that.
Okay. Well, okay. All right. Yes. Put the push
Thank
on
you.
and get the word out, and hopefully we get some response from the families. So, okay, that brings us to board comments.
If I may, could I just mention a couple other?
You want more time?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got a couple things I'd like to mention to you. Believe it or not, some of them are good. Just for your information, I attended an all-day meeting yesterday with the mayor and several other community leaders to start the process of applying for a Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge. 5 awards will be awarded nationally to 5 cities, one for $5 million and one for $1 million. It's a slight chance we'll get it, but if you don't wet a line, you won't catch a fish. I asked the mayor to look at our achievement gap, and that's what they're looking at. So we got our. I thought that was good, and I appreciate so much that group approaching it from the school's perspective. I also attended the Poverty to Progress meeting last night with Dr. Brennan and others, and we'll report to that when we have something substance when that group comes to a conclusion as to what they're going to approach. Today at the No Kid Hunger Virginia Summit in Richmond, Lynchburg City Schools was recognized by the First Lady of Virginia, Dorothy McAuliffe, as one of 7 school divisions in the Commonwealth for our leadership in ending childhood hunger in Virginia through alternative breakfast, summer school food service program, and the community eligibility provision. Ms. Beth Morris, our very outstanding Director of Food Services, accepted that award. I invited her to come tonight, but she said she wanted to get home to her family instead. But isn't that a nice award? So congratulations to Beth Morris and her staff. Thank you. That's all.
All right, very good. Board member comments. Dr. Brennan.
Just very briefly, I know everyone in this room, including the audience, knows that Monday's a big day for the Lynchburg City Schools, with Ray Associates doing open forums at Sandusky Middle School and at EC Glass School for the new superintendent. And there's also a survey available, and I'm not sure if someone tonight could just, some of the administration, just remind us as how that's being publicized to the community. They know about the surveys and the forums, which I'm sure will be well attended.
You want to comment on that, Wendy?
Yes, we have sent out media releases to media outlets so that they can advertise that information for us. We have it on Channel 17. The city is advertising on their channel. We have sent out emails to all parents and all staff. We've also sent out calls to all parents and staff. And we have sent out letters to various organization members of Partners in Education, Ed Foundation, principals, everybody, so that they know when they can come and provide information regarding what they would like to see for the next superintendent.
Other board member comments? Dr. Coleman.
Yes. Just 2 quick things. I just want to encourage all of us to have our thinking caps on, always, to find every possible way that does not require additional financial expenses to do whatever we need to do, including the matter we just mentioned. Lastly, there will be a student discipline committee meeting this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. here in the boardroom, and we thank Ms. Brown, Director Brown, for all of the work that she does, and school board members Morrison, Polly, and myself. We hopefully will be in place at 5:30 Thursday to take care of that.
That will be 5 p.m.
Well, excuse me, thank you,
5 p.m.
Mr. Copeland. So,
yeah, they changed.
5 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
to Dr. Copeland, for getting me straight on that. 5 p.m.
Started on time.
All right.
My bad.
I'll be here.
My bad. So,
okay.
Yeah, just to reiterate, the Ray and Associates, they'll be here all day, interviewing various stakeholder groups. Board members, if you happen to fall into other stakeholder groups, you've had your interview and input time, so you don't need to double dip. We do have a couple informational items. We do have school board training Friday up at the VSBA offices in Charlottesville. And our next board meeting is Tuesday, October 3rd at 5:30 p.m., our normal board meeting time here in the Edmund building. And with that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.